The great council chamber floated in space like a giant metal flower, its curved walls stretched up toward a dome made of clear crystal. Through the crystal, stars twinkled in the endless darkness of space. Below the station, the planet Vextar. Prime spun slowly, its blue and green surface covered in clouds. Inside the chamber, beings from 12 different worlds sat in a perfect circle. Some looked like giant lizards with scales that changed color. Others were made of living crystal that rang like bells when they moved. A few were just floating clouds of gas held together by energy fields. They all had one thing in common today. They were laughing. Kang Dae-ho stood in the center of the circle. He was tall for a human, with gray hair and a serious face. He wore a simple black suit that looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor of the aliens around him. In his hands, he held a small device that projected pictures in the air above his head. "Members of the Galactic Council," Dae-ho said in a calm voice, "I present to you the military forces of Earth." The pictures showed human soldiers in different uniforms. There were sailors on ships, pilots in fighter jets, and tank crews standing next to their machines. The aliens watched with polite interest until the pictures changed to show something that made them start to whisper. "These are our paratrooper units," Dae-ho continued. The picture showed men and women jumping out of aircraft. They fell through the sky with only fabric wings attached to their backs. "They specialize in rapid deployment behind enemy lines." The whispers grew louder. Then someone started to laugh. It was Council Leader Jang Hye-won, a tall creature with 4 arms and skin like polished silver. Her laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Forgive me, Ambassador," she said, wiping tears from her large purple eyes. "But did you say they'd jump out of perfectly good aircraft?" "Yes," Dae-ho replied. "They deploy by parachute to—" "Parachute?" Another council member interrupted. This one looked like a walking tree with glowing fruit hanging from his branches. "You mean they fall and hope a piece of cloth saves them?" The laughter spread around the circle like fire. The crystal beings made musical sounds that hurt human ears. The gas clouds pulsed with bright colors. Even the most serious members of the council were smiling. Yoon Ji-woo stepped forward from where she had been standing behind Dae-ho. She was younger than the ambassador, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a military uniform with small medals on her chest. Her face was red with anger, but she kept her voice level. "With respect, Council Leader," Ji-woo said, "our paratrooper units have successfully completed thousands of missions across multiple continents and climate zones." "Oh, I'm sure they have," Jang Hye-won said, still laughing. "But you must understand our confusion. Every civilized species uses teleportation for rapid deployment. Why would anyone choose to fall from the sky like a rock?" A reptilian council, member with green scales, hissed his agreement. "My people have been teleporting troops for over 3,000 years. It is instant, safe, and precise. Your method seems—" He paused, searching for a polite word. "Primitive." "Suicidal," added another member bluntly. The pictures above Dae-ho's head continued to cycle through images of human paratroopers. They showed soldiers landing in forests, deserts, and snowy mountains. But instead of looking impressive, the images only made the aliens laugh harder. "Look at them," called out a floating gas cloud whose voice sounded like steam escaping from a pipe. "They're covered in mud. Their equipment is scattered everywhere. Half of them look injured just from landing." "And the time it takes," said the crystal being, whose voice rang like a bell. "Our sensors show it takes your soldiers several minutes to reach the ground. We can teleport an entire army in seconds." Dae-ho's hands tightened around his projector, but his voice stayed calm. "Our methods may seem unusual, but they are effective. Human paratroopers have adapted to environments and completed missions that—" "Adapted?" Jang Hye-won's 4 arms gestured dramatically. "Dear Ambassador, adaptation is what you do when your technology fails. We simply use better technology." The lizard-like council member leaned forward in his chair. "Tell me, how many of these paratroopers are lost in each deployment? Surely the casualty rate from simply getting to the battlefield must be enormous." "Actually," Ji-woo said, her voice getting sharper, "our safety record is excellent. Modern paratrooper training has reduced landing injuries to less than—" "Safety record?" The tree-like being's fruit glowed brighter with amusement. You need a safety record for deploying troops? We haven't lost a soldier to deployment failure in centuries. More laughter filled the chamber. Some of the aliens were holding their sides. Others were wiping tears from eyes or optical sensors. The sound echoed off the crystal dome above them. Daeho looked around the circle of laughing faces and took a deep breath. Perhaps, he said loudly enough to be heard over the noise. We could arrange a demonstration? The laughter slowly died down. Jang Hye-won tilted her silver head to one side. A demonstration? Yes, Daeho said. Let our paratroopers show you what they can do. Here, asked the reptilian member. On this station? Jiwoo stepped forward, again. If the council would permit it, we could stage a training exercise. Nothing dangerous, just a simple infiltration scenario. The aliens looked at each other. Some were still smiling. Others looked curious. The gas cloud pulsed with different colors as it thought. You want to jump out of an aircraft inside our space station? Jang Hye-won asked. Not inside, Jiwoo corrected. We would deploy from orbit and attempt to reach a designated target area within the station. Through our defenses? The crystal being's voice rose in pitch with surprise. If you permit it, Daeho said. Consider it a cultural exchange. You can observe human military techniques firsthand. The council members whispered among themselves in a dozen different languages. Some made sounds like music, others hissed or clicked. The conversation went on for several minutes while the two humans waited. Finally, Jang Hye-won raised one of her 4 hands for silence. Very well, she said. We will arrange a demonstration. It should be educational. The way she said the word made it clear she expected the humans to fail spectacularly. Around the circle, other council members nodded and smiled. They were already looking forward to the entertainment. However, the council leader continued, we must insist on certain safety measures. We cannot have your soldiers actually damaging station property or injuring themselves too severely. Of course, Daeho agreed, and we will need to limit the exercise to the lower training levels. The upper sections contain sensitive diplomatic areas that cannot be disturbed. Understood. How many of your paratroopers will participate? Asked the reptilian member. Jiwoo glanced at Daeho, who nodded slightly. 4, she said. A standard squad. 4? The tree-like being's fruit dimmed with confusion. Only 4 against our entire security system? It should be sufficient for a demonstration, Jiwoo replied. This brought another round of laughter, though quieter than before. The aliens clearly thought 4 humans would provide a brief but amusing spectacle before being stopped by the station's defenses. When would you like to conduct this demonstration? Jang Hye-won asked. Tomorrow, if possible, Daeho said. That will give us time to prepare our team and coordinate with your security staff. Excellent. The council leader's smile showed too many teeth. We look forward to seeing these famous human paratroopers in action. As the council session ended and the aliens began to file out of the chamber, their voices filled with excited chatter about tomorrow's show. They spoke of taking bets on how quickly the humans would be caught, whether any would actually reach the target area, and how many would need medical attention afterward. Daeho and Jiwoo stood alone in the center of the empty chamber, looking up at the stars through the crystal dome. Think they'll still be laughing tomorrow? Jiwoo asked quietly. Daeho allowed himself a small smile. I doubt it. The next morning, the council chamber buzzed with excitement. Word had spread throughout the massive space station about the human demonstration. Aliens who normally spent their time in laboratories or diplomatic offices had found excuses to visit the observation deck. The viewing screens showed crowds gathering in corridors and lounges, all waiting to see the show. Jang Hye-won stood at the center of the chamber, her 4 silver arms moving as she spoke to a group of security officers. Remember, this is meant to be educational, she said, though her purple eyes sparkled with amusement. We want the humans to have a fair chance to demonstrate their techniques. The security chief, a massive creature covered in thick gray armor, made a sound like grinding stone. His name was Nam Yu-jin, and he had been protecting the station for over 50 years. Nothing had ever gotten past his defenses. Nothing would today either. The exercise parameters are simple, Yu-jin announced as the humans entered the chamber. His voice boomed from speakers built into his armor. Your team will attempt to reach the training deck's command center. You will have 4 hours to complete the mission. Park Min-ho walked at the front of the human group. He was shorter than the ambassador, but built like a machine made for war. His uniform was plain green fabric with no decoration except a single patch showing jumping wings. Behind him came 3 other soldiers, each carrying a large backpack and wearing the same simple uniform. "What defenses will we face?" asked Lee So-jin, a woman with quick eyes and clever hands. She carried more equipment than the others, with wires and small devices hanging from her belt. Yoo-jin's laugh sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. "The same defenses that protect this station from entire fleets. Energy barriers that can stop starship weapons. Automated sentries with targeting systems accurate to the molecular level. Gravity wells that can crush asteroids. Temporal displacement fields that slow down time itself." He gestured with one armored hand, and holographic images appeared in the air. The humans watched as the pictures showed layer after layer of impossible technology. Walls of pure energy, flying robots with weapons that fired beams of light, fields that bent space and time like water. Additionally, Yoo-jin continued, clearly enjoying himself, "we have sensor nets that can detect a single bacteria from a kilometer away, pattern recognition systems that identify threats before they form, and response teams trained to stop any form of infiltration known to galactic civilization." Kim Tae-won whistled softly as he watched the display. He was a stocky man with scars on his hands and a toolkit that looked like it had been through several wars. "Impressive," he said. "And this is just the training deck," added another security officer. "The actual defensive systems protecting the diplomatic levels are 10 times more sophisticated." Choi Hana said nothing, but her dark eyes studied every detail of the holographic display. She was the smallest of the 4 humans, quiet and still like a cat waiting to pounce. Her rifle was old-fashioned compared to the energy weapons of the aliens, but she held it like it was part of her body. "Your insertion point will be here," Yoo-jin said as the display zoomed out to show the entire station. A red dot appeared 50 kilometers above the training deck. "A standard atmospheric entry. You will deploy from your transport vessel and attempt to reach the command center using only your primitive equipment." The word primitive hung in the air like an insult. Several aliens in the observation area chuckled. Min-ho's face didn't change, but his hands tightened slightly. "Rules of engagement?" So-jin asked. "Non-lethal force only," Yoo-jin replied. "Our systems will use stun settings. Your weapons should be configured similarly." "Time limit?" This from Tae-won, 4 hours from the moment you leave your transport. "If you haven't reached the command center by then, the exercise ends." "And if we succeed?" Min-ho asked quietly. The question brought another wave of laughter from the watching aliens. Jang Hye-won stepped forward, her 4 arms spread wide in a gesture that looked welcoming but felt mocking. "If you succeed, Ambassador Kang," she said, "then humanity will have our full respect and immediate membership in the Galactic Council. And if we fail, then we will understand that human military tactics, while charming, are not suitable for modern warfare." The unspoken message was clear. Failure would mean humanity would be seen as a primitive species, barely worth considering for council membership. They would be patted on the head like children and sent home to play with their simple toys. Min-ho nodded once. "Understood." "Excellent." Jang Hye-won clapped all 4 hands together. "The transport vessel is ready when you are." As the humans filed out of the chamber, the aliens began placing bets. The crystal beings rang with musical tones as they wagered on how many minutes the exercise would last. The gas clouds pulsed with colors indicating their confidence in the station's defenses. Even the usually serious tree-like council member was discussing odds with his neighbors. The transport vessel was small and basic, little more than a metal box with engines. It sat in the station's launch bay like a child's toy next to the sleek alien shuttles. Shin Dong-wook, the pilot, was waiting by the boarding ramp. He was an older man with steady hands and the kind of calm that came from flying through storms. "Everything ready?" Min-ho asked as his team loaded their gear. "Ready as we'll ever be," Dong-wook replied. "The aliens gave us permission to approach the station from any angle. They seem pretty confident in their defenses." "They should be," Sojin said, checking her equipment one more time. What we saw in there was serious hardware. Military-grade stuff that could stop a small army. Good thing we're not a small army, Taewon said with a grin. Ha-Na was the last aboard. She paused at the bottom of the ramp and looked back at the observation windows where aliens were gathered to watch. Her expression was unreadable. Something wrong? Minho asked. No, she said quietly. I'm just thinking about how they're going to explain this to their grandchildren. The transport lifted off smoothly and headed for space. Through the small windows, the team could see the massive bulk of the space station growing smaller below them. It was shaped like a flower, with dozens of petals made of metal and crystal. Each petal was the size of a city, connected to the others by bridges that sparkled with energy. Pretty, Taewon commented. Pretty defended, Sojin added, studying readings on her scanner. I'm picking up energy signatures all over that thing. Whatever they're using for security, it's powered by some serious technology. How serious? Minho asked. The kind that could turn a battleship into scrap metal without working up a sweat. Dongwook's voice came over the intercom from the pilot's seat. Approaching drop altitude, 50 kilometers and climbing. Station control is asking if you're ready to begin the exercise. Minho looked at his team. Sojin was making final adjustments to her communication gear. Taewon was checking the charges in his demolition kit. Hana was cleaning her rifle with the patience of someone who had done it 10,000 times before. Tell them we're ready, Minho said. Copy that. There was a pause. Then Dongwook's voice again. Station control acknowledges. Exercise begins in 60 seconds. Good luck down there. The transport climbed higher, carrying the 4 humans toward their drop point. Below them, the space station waited like a fortress made of light and energy. In the observation decks, hundreds of aliens watched their screens and waited for the show to begin. 30 seconds, Dongwook announced. Minho stood and moved to the rear door. His team formed up behind him, checking each other's gear one last time. The ritual was as old as warfare itself, soldiers preparing to face the unknown together. 10 seconds. The door opened, and stars filled the space beyond. The station hung below them like a glowing jewel against the darkness of space. Wind that shouldn't exist in the vacuum howled past the opening as the transport's atmosphere field held. Go. And with that simple word, 4 humans stepped into the void and began to fall toward the most defended target in the galaxy. Behind them, the transport turned away and headed for a safe distance. Ahead of them lay 50 kilometers of empty space, automated defenses that could destroy fleets, and alien technology beyond anything Earth had ever imagined. The real test was about to begin. In the observation deck, aliens pressed against the viewing screens. The display showed 4 small dots falling through space toward the massive station. To most watchers, it looked like 4 pieces of debris that would soon be swept away by the automated defenses. Current velocity? Asked Jang Hyewan. Increasing steadily, reported a technician whose voice buzzed like an insect. They should reach the first defense layer in approximately 12 minutes. And then the show ends quickly, Nam Yu-jin rumbled from his position at the security console. No organism can survive direct exposure to our barrier fields. The energy discharge will render them unconscious immediately. On the screen, the 4 dots continued to fall. They seemed helpless, tiny specks against the massive structure below them. Several aliens had already started discussing what to have for lunch after the brief entertainment ended. But 50 kilometers above them, something very different was happening. Minho fell through the vacuum with his arms and legs spread wide, using his body like a wing to control his descent. The special suit he wore was designed for this exact purpose: movement through space without a vehicle. Around him, his 3 team members did the same, their bodies dark shapes against the stars. Sound off, he said into his helmet radio. Sojin here, all systems green. Her voice was calm despite falling at several hundred meters per second. Taewon ready, charges armed and waiting. Hana in position, target acquired. Minho smiled inside his helmet. The aliens below had no idea what they were really facing. They saw primitive humans jumping out of aircraft like savages. What they couldn't see was the result of centuries of human warfare evolution. First defense layer coming up, Sojin reported, reading instruments built into her helmet display. Energy barrier, full spectrum, designed to stop projectiles and energy weapons. Any gaps? Minho asked. Negative. Complete coverage. There was a pause. But the field has a cycle rate. It pulses every 3.7 seconds. Window? zero point 0.2 seconds. Maybe less. In the observation deck, aliens watched the tiny dots approach the first barrier. The energy field was invisible to normal eyes, but their screens showed it as a wall of blue light surrounding the entire station. Contact in 10 seconds, the technician announced. Yujin leaned forward in his chair. This should be interesting. The 4 humans hit the barrier field at exactly the moment it cycled off for maintenance. For 0.2 seconds, the field dropped to 0 power, while the generators reset themselves. For 0.2 seconds, there was a gap in the most powerful defensive system in the galaxy. 4 humans fell through that gap like they had planned it. What? Yujin's voice shook the observation deck. How did they... Field cycle. Sojin's voice crackled over the radio to her team. I told you the aliens rely too much on their technology. They make everything automatic, which means everything has patterns. Next layer? Minho asked. Automated sentries. Flying robots with target lock systems. Her voice was still calm. They're already tracking us. The robots were beautiful things, shaped like metal birds with wings that glowed blue. They moved through space with grace and speed, their weapons charging as they identified the falling humans as targets. Evasive action, Minho ordered. What happened next made several aliens in the observation deck drop their drinks. The 4 humans didn't try to hide or defend themselves. Instead, they began to move through 3-dimensional space in ways that no other species had ever imagined. Minho twisted his body and used the station's own gravity field to alter his trajectory. Sojin fired a device that created electromagnetic interference, confusing the robot's targeting systems. Tae-Wan released small charges that exploded in precise patterns, creating debris clouds that the robots had to avoid. Hana did something that made Yujin stand up and stare at the screen. She pulled out her rifle and began shooting at the robots, while falling through space at terminal velocity. Impossible, he whispered. The rifle was simple compared to alien energy weapons. It fired small metal projectiles using chemical explosives. But Hana had been shooting things since she could walk. She understood wind and gravity and movement in ways that no computer could calculate. Her bullets found their targets with precision that the station's own computers couldn't match. One by one, the beautiful metal birds fell silent and drifted away into space. How are they moving like that? Asked a crystal being, its voice ringing with confusion. I don't understand, said Zhang Hyewan. Our models show that organic beings cannot maneuver effectively in 3-dimensional space without mechanical assistance. Tell that to them, Yujin muttered. The humans continued to fall. They had passed through 2 defense layers that should have stopped them immediately. Below them, more defenses waited. Gravity wells that could crush starships, temporal fields that slowed time itself, and energy weapons that could cut through solid metal. 3rd layer approaching, Sojin reported. Gravity manipulation system. It's designed to trap incoming objects in null space pockets. I see it, Minho replied. The gravity wells were invisible, but his instruments showed them as deep holes in space-time. Tae-Wan! On it. The demolitions expert released a string of small devices. They exploded in sequence, creating pressure waves that interacted with the gravity fields in unexpected ways. Instead of being trapped, the humans were able to use the gravity wells like stepping stones, bouncing from one to another and picking up speed. Are they surfing our gravity defenses? Asked an alien technician in disbelief. They were. Tae-Wan had studied the station's defensive systems and realized that the gravity wells were designed to stop objects coming from outside. They weren't meant to handle objects that could redirect themselves between the wells. It was like trying to catch someone jumping between trampolines. 4th layer, Sojin announced. Temporal displacement fields. This is going to be tricky. The temporal fields were the most sophisticated defense on the station. They slowed down time in specific areas, making fast-moving objects crawl like insects trapped in honey. No known weapon could move quickly enough to get through them. But the humans weren't weapons. They were something the aliens had never encountered before. Intelligent beings who could adapt their tactics in real time. Remember your training. Minho said calmly. Temporal fields affect velocity, not decision-making. We think at normal speed even if we move slowly. The four humans entered the temporal field and immediately slowed down until they were barely moving. But their minds worked at full speed. They had trained for this exact situation in Earth's most advanced laboratories. While their bodies moved, like statues, their brains calculated trajectories and planned their next moves. Sojin activated a device that created temporal echoes, false images that confused the field generators. Taewon released charges with timer delays that would explode after they left the field. Hana lined up shots that would fire automatically when her rifle's computer detected normal time. And Minho did something that no alien had ever seen before. He began to swim through the temporal field like it was thick water, using techniques that human researchers had developed for underwater combat. "This is not possible," Yujin said, but his voice lacked conviction. The evidence was right there on the screen. The humans emerged from the temporal field like divers breaking the surface of a lake. They were closer to the station now, close enough to see individual windows and docking bays. Below them waited the final layer of defense, the training deck itself, with its energy weapons and response teams. "Station approach," Sojin reported. "Multiple target locks. They're powering up every weapon they have." "Let them," Minho replied. "Stick to the plan." The plan was simple in concept, but impossible in execution. It required timing that was perfect to the millisecond, coordination that seemed telepathic, and skills that no other species possessed. The four humans activated their parachutes. But these weren't the simple fabric wings the aliens expected. These were advanced systems that could be controlled with scientific precision. The humans didn't just fall toward the station. They flew. Sojin headed for the communication arrays, her equipment ready to hack systems that the aliens thought were unhackable. Taewon aimed for the power grid, his charges designed to create cascading failures in the station's energy systems. Hana found a position where she could provide covering fire for the others, her rifle already calculating wind patterns and target priorities, and Minho flew straight toward the command center, like an arrow shot from a bow. In the observation deck, silence fell like a hammer. Hundreds of aliens stared at screens that showed four primitive humans doing things that their most advanced computers said were impossible. "Sir," asked a technician, "should we activate the emergency protocols?" Yujin stared at the display for a long moment. 4 dots were approaching his impregnable fortress, and somehow he was starting to think they might actually reach it. "Not yet," he said quietly. "Let's see what they do next." But in his heart, he was beginning to suspect that he already knew the answer. These weren't the primitive jumping monkeys the Council had been expecting. These were something else entirely, something that the galaxy had never seen before. These were humans at war, and they were winning. The training deck had never seen combat like this. Sojin landed on a communication tower with the grace of a cat, her boots magnetizing to the metal surface. Around her, automated defense systems came alive like angry wasps. Energy beams cut through the air where she had been a moment before, but she was already moving, climbing down the tower's side like a spider. "Communication hub located," she reported into her headset while dodging another volley of laser fire. "Beginning infiltration. The tower's access port was designed to be opened only by authorized alien biosignatures. It should have been impossible for a human to crack. But Sojin had spent her entire career learning how other species thought, and she had discovered something important. Aliens made their security too complicated. While the port scanned for scales, crystalline matrices or gas cloud energy patterns, Sojin simply pulled out a small tool and began working on the mechanical aspects of the lock. Sometimes the simplest approach was the best approach. "How is she doing that?" asked a technician in the observation deck. "That port has 17 different security layers." 18, Yujin corrected grimly, "and she's bypassing all of them." The lock clicked open. Sojin slipped inside the tower and began connecting her equipment to the alien communication systems. Her fingers moved over unfamiliar controls with the confidence of someone who had learned to adapt to any technology. "First node compromised," she announced, "mapping their network now." Meanwhile, Taewon had landed near the station's main power distribution center. The area was heavily defended by floating sentinel drones that moved in perfect formation patterns. Their weapons could track targets moving at supersonic speeds and hit them with pinpoint accuracy. The problem was, they were programmed to track targets that moved predictably. Taiwan didn't move predictably. He had learned his trade in the mountains of Earth, where avalanches and rock slides could kill you if you couldn't think 3 steps ahead. He moved like water flowing around obstacles, never following a straight line, never doing what the drones expected. "Target lock lost," reported one of the Sentinel drones to the station's central computer. "Reacquiring," replied another. "Target lock lost." "Target? Where did it go?" Taiwan was already inside the power center, his demolition charges placed. With surgical precision. He didn't want to destroy the station, just create enough confusion to complete the mission. His explosives were small and carefully calculated to disrupt power flow without causing permanent damage. "Charges set," he reported. "Ready to create a light show on your signal." Hana had found a sniper's perch on a maintenance platform that gave her a clear view of most of the training deck. Her rifle was ancient compared to the energy weapons around her, but it had advantages that the aliens couldn't understand. Their weapons were perfect. They hit exactly where they were aimed, with no variation. But Hana's rifle was imperfect, and she had learned to work with its imperfections. She could curve bullets around obstacles, ricochet shots off metal surfaces, and hit targets that were technically impossible to reach. "Overwatch position established," she reported while tracking a security patrol through her scope. "I count 20 hostiles moving toward Minho's position." "Copy that," Minho's voice came back. "Keep them busy." Hana smiled and squeezed the trigger. Her bullet bounced off a metal beam, ricocheted off a pipe, and struck a drone's sensor array. The machine spun in confusion and crashed into its partner. 18. "Hostiles," she corrected. In the observation deck, aliens stared in disbelief as their most advanced defensive systems began to fail one by one. The humans weren't just getting through, they were making it look easy. "This is impossible," muttered a gas cloud being. "Our systems were designed by the greatest military minds in the galaxy." "Yes," said Jang Hae-won quietly. "They were designed by the greatest military minds in the galaxy, but not by the greatest military minds in the universe." The station's central computer was having problems it had never experienced before. Every system was designed to counter known threats using established patterns, but the humans weren't following any known patterns. They were improvising, adapting, and creating new solutions in real time. "Alert," the computer announced in its calm, artificial voice. "Unrecognized tactical signatures detected. Unable to classify threat assessment. Requesting updated parameters." "Give me options," Yujin growled. "Option 1. Increase security to maximum alert. Deploy all available forces." "Do it." Suddenly, the training deck filled with security forces. Alien soldiers in advanced armor materialized from teleporter pads. Flying vehicles dropped from hidden bays in the ceiling. Energy barriers sprang up to block every possible escape route. It should have ended the exercise immediately. 4 humans against an army of the galaxy's most advanced warriors should have been no contest. But the humans had been expecting this. "Now would be good," Minho said calmly as he ran between energy blasts that could have vaporized him. "With pleasure," Taiwan replied. The lights went out. Taiwan's carefully placed charges didn't destroy the power grid. They just confused it. Instead of total darkness, the training deck was filled with flickering, unreliable light that made it impossible for the alien soldiers to target effectively. In the confusion, Sojin's hack of the communication system took effect. The orders being sent to security forces suddenly became mixed up. Teams were sent to empty corridors while the real targets moved freely through areas that were supposed to be guarded. "Communication error," reported a squad leader. "We were ordered to secure Section 7, but our backup orders say Section 12. "Central Command, please clarify," called another team. But Central Command was receiving reports that didn't make sense. Their sensors showed human targets in 6 different locations at once. Their communication logs showed orders they hadn't given. Their tactical computers were reporting threat assessments that contradicted each other. Hana's contribution to the chaos was more direct. Every few seconds, another security drone would malfunction or crash. Her bullets were finding weak points in their armor that the designers had never considered. Places where a small piece of metal could disable sophisticated systems. "How is she hitting targets in the dark?" demanded Yujin. "She's not using our targeting systems," replied a technician. She's using... I don't know what she's using. Hana was using skills that predated technology by millions of years. She could track movement by sound, estimate distance by instinct, and hit targets she couldn't see by understanding how they would move. Her ancestors had hunted with spears and arrows, and those skills were still alive in her bones. But it was Minho who truly shocked the watching aliens. Instead of trying to sneak past the security forces, he was moving straight through them. When energy barriers blocked his path, he found ways around them that the designers had never imagined. When gravity traps tried to slow him down, he used their own force against them to move faster. He's treating our defenses like a training course, one of the technicians said in amazement. That was exactly what Minho was doing. Earth's military had spent generations learning to fight in every possible environment. Mountains, jungles, deserts, underwater, in space. Human soldiers had learned to adapt to conditions that would kill other species. This space station was just another environment to master. Target approaching command center, Yujin announced grimly. All units converge on Section 4. But when the security forces reached Section 4, Minho wasn't there. He was in Section 6, having taken a route through the station's maintenance areas that no alien had ever considered using. Where is he? Demanded a squad leader. Unknown, came the reply. Target has disappeared from all sensors. Minho hadn't disappeared. He had just stopped thinking like an alien. The station's sensors were designed to track beings who moved in predictable patterns, used technology for everything, and followed logical routes between points. They weren't designed to track someone who could crawl through air vents, climb up walls, and navigate by compass and instinct. 2 minutes to target, Minho reported to his team. Around the training deck, his 3 teammates continued their own missions. Sojin had turned the station's communication system into her personal playground, sending false orders and intercepting real ones. Taewon was playing hide-and-seek with an entire army while keeping the lights flickering at just the wrong moments. Hana was providing cover fire for targets she couldn't see against enemies who couldn't find her. "This is not warfare," said a crystal being in the observation deck. "This is art." "It's chaos," corrected Yujin. But even he had to admit there was something beautiful about watching the humans work. They moved like parts of a single organism, each one supporting the others in ways that seemed telepathic. "Sir," called a technician, "the humans are 1 minute from the command center. Should we activate the final defense protocols?" Yujin looked at the screens showing his mighty fortress, being taken apart by 4 primitive beings with simple weapons and basic equipment. Every system he had trusted, every piece of technology he had relied on, had been turned against him by creatures who shouldn't have been able to understand any of it. "Sir?" the technician asked again. "No," Yujin said quietly. "Let's see if they can finish what they started." In the command center, automated systems prepared for a... The command center fell silent. Minho stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by 12 alien guards who had weapons pointed at him from every direction. His uniform was torn and dirty from crawling through maintenance shafts. His face was streaked with grease and sweat. His equipment was basic compared to the advanced technology around him, but he was smiling. "Impossible," whispered the guard captain, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 eyes. "The sensors showed no breach. The barriers are still active. How? Did you—" "Air vent," Minho said simply, pointing up at the ceiling. "You might want to add that to your security checklist." In the observation deck above, stunned silence had replaced the earlier laughter. Jang Hyewon stared at the screens with all 4 of her mouths hanging open. Around her, aliens who had been making jokes about primitive humans now watched in amazement as their most secure facility had been penetrated by a single soldier. "Status report," Yujin's voice boomed through the command center speakers. "Sir," the guard captain replied, still not quite believing what he was seeing. "The human has reached the command center." "How?" He came through the air vent, sir." There was a long pause. "The air vent?" "Yes, sir." Another pause. "We forgot about the air vents." "Yes, sir." "In the most secure facility in the galaxy, designed by the greatest military engineers in known space, we forgot about the air vents." "Yes, sir." Yujin's sigh could be heard throughout the station. "Stand down, all units. Exercise complete." But Minho raised one hand. "Actually, if I could make a request?" Every weapon in the room twitched toward him, but he remained calm. "Could I get my team up here? I think the council should see all of us together." "Your team?" asked the guard captain. "Where is your team?" As if summoned by his words, Sojin's voice crackled through the room's communication system. "Hello, Command Center. Nice to meet you. I've been listening to your communications for the past 10 minutes. Did you know your security protocols have a really interesting weakness in subsection 47? The aliens looked around in confusion until they realized the voice was coming from their own speakers. Sojin had not only hacked their communication system, she was using it like her personal telephone. Also, her voice continued cheerfully, "I've been recording everything. The part where you called us primitive jumping monkeys was particularly entertaining. I'm sure the Galactic News Network would love to hear it." Taewan's arrival was more dramatic. The command center's doors, which were designed to stop starship weapons, simply opened. He walked in casually, his demolition kit slung over one shoulder, nodding politely to the guards who were pointing weapons at him. "How did you open the doors?" demanded the guard captain. "I didn't," Taewan replied. "I convinced them to open themselves. Your security system is very sophisticated, but it has a logic problem. If you create the right power fluctuation pattern, the doors think there's an emergency and automatically unlock. That's impossible. Those doors are controlled by quantum encrypted—" "Yeah, I know. But quantum encryption doesn't help if you bypass the quantum part and go straight to the mechanical systems. Sometimes old-fashioned solutions work better than fancy technology." Hana's entrance was the most unsettling of all. She didn't come through doors or vents or windows. She was simply there, sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, her rifle resting across her knees. None of the guards had seen her enter. None of the sensors had detected her movement. "Ma'am," the guard captain said weakly. "When did you—" "About 5 minutes ago," Hana replied quietly. "I've been watching you watch the screens. You have good reflexes, but you only look where you expect to see threats." The guard captain looked around the room with all 4 of his eyes, trying to understand how a human had appeared in the most secure room on the station without anyone noticing. "I came through the door when it opened for your friend," Hana explained. "You were all looking at him, so you didn't see me. Basic camouflage. Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight." Now all 4 humans stood together in the command center, surrounded by guards who had no idea what to do with them. Their weapons were still drawn, but pointing them at the humans seemed pointless now. These weren't enemies to be shot. They were problems to be solved, and none of the guards knew the solution. "Mission accomplished," Minho announced. 4 humans, deployed by parachute, successfully infiltrated and captured the command center of the most secure facility in the galaxy. Total time, 3 hours and 17 minutes. The intercom crackled to life. "All units, report to debriefing stations. Exercise concluded." Yujin's voice sounded tired. As the guards filed out of the room, still shaking their heads in confusion, the 4 humans gathered around the command center's main console. The screens showed the entire training deck, where alien security forces were slowly emerging from hiding places and emergency positions. "Think they learned anything?" Sojin asked, watching a squad of soldiers try to explain to their commander how they had spent 2 hours searching for targets that were never there. "Some of them," Minho replied. "The smart ones will start asking questions about their assumptions. And the others? Will probably design better air vent covers." Hana smiled, a rare expression on her usually serious face. "Good. Maybe next time will be more challenging." Taewan laughed. "More challenging? We just broke into the most defended place in known space using equipment that most of these aliens consider primitive toys." "Exactly," Hana said. "Next time, they'll be ready for us. That's when things get interesting." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Daeho and military attaché Jiwoo. They entered the command center with an escort of alien officials who looked like they had swallowed something unpleasant. "Congratulations," Daeho said to his team. "I believe you've made your point." "What point was that, sir?" Minho asked innocently. "That human military tactics are not primitive. They're just different." Jang Hye-won entered the room with her usual entourage, but her manner had changed completely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect mixed with confusion. "Ambassador," she said formally, The Galactic Council requests a full debrief of this exercise. We need to understand how your people accomplished what our computers are telling us was impossible. Of course, Deho replied. But first, I believe you owe these soldiers an apology. For what? For calling them jumping monkeys. Jang Hye-won's silver skin flushed a darker color. Around the room, alien officials looked uncomfortable. The recordings Sojin had made were already spreading through the station's communication networks. You're right, the council leader said finally. I apologize. We underestimated your capabilities. Thank you, Minho said. But if I may make a suggestion? Yes? Don't try to understand what we did by looking at our equipment or our techniques. Try to understand how we think. Explain. Minho gestured to his team. Every species in the galaxy has developed technology to solve problems. Better weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. But humans developed something else. The ability to solve problems without perfect technology. He pointed to the air vent in the ceiling. You have sensors that can detect individual molecules, but you forgot about air vents because your technology made them seem unimportant. We don't have technology that advanced, so we still remember that simple solutions can work. Sojin stepped forward. Your communication systems are quantum encrypted and unhackable, but they still need to talk to mechanical systems that open doors and turn on lights. We learned to find the places where perfect technology meets imperfect reality. And your soldiers? Asked Yu Jin, who had just entered the room. How did they move through our defenses like they weren't there? Practice, Hana said simply. We practice fighting in every environment we can imagine, against every enemy we can think of. When we found new environments and new enemies, we practiced against those too. But our simulation programs can generate millions of scenarios, began a technician. Can they generate scenarios where the rules change in the middle of the fight? Taewon interrupted. Can they generate enemies who ignore your assumptions about how warfare works? Can they generate problems that don't have technological solutions? The technician fell silent. We don't fight scenarios, Minho explained. We fight reality, and reality doesn't follow rules or respect your technology. Reality is messy and unpredictable and dangerous. So we learned to be messy and unpredictable and dangerous too. Jang Hye-won looked around the room at her staff, her security forces, and her advanced technology. All of it had failed against 4 humans with basic equipment and clever thinking. What do you want from us? She asked quietly. Nothing, Deho replied. We want to join the Galactic Council as equals. We want to share what we know and learn what you know. We want to make the galaxy safer for everyone. And if we refuse, then you refuse. We'll go home and continue developing our own technology and our own solutions. But if you ever face an enemy that doesn't fight by your rules, you'll wish you had humans on your side. The council leader looked at the 4 soldiers who had just proven that the galaxy's greatest offenses could be overcome by courage, intelligence, and determination. She thought about enemies who might not be as polite as humans, enemies who might use similar tactics for. 6 months later, the same council chamber looked very different. Where once aliens had sat in perfect circles discussing the primitive nature of human warfare, now mixed groups of beings clustered around holographic displays showing combat techniques. That would have been unimaginable before the demonstration. The laughter had been replaced by intense study. Again, said Oh Sung-min, his crystalline form ringing with concentration. Show me again how the human calculated the ricochet angle. The hologram replayed Hana's impossible shot, the bullet bouncing off 3 surfaces before hitting its target. Sung-min had been studying human combat methods for months, and he still couldn't understand how they made such calculations without computer assistance. It's not calculation, explained Instructor Park Jun-ho, a former paratrooper who now taught at the newly established Human Military Training Center. It's intuition developed through practice. Hana has fired thousands of rounds in thousands of different environments. Her brain knows how bullets behave even when her conscious mind doesn't. But how do we teach intuition to beings who rely on computational analysis? Asked another student, a gas cloud entity whose colors shifted with confusion. The same way humans learned it, Jun-ho replied. Practice. Lots and lots of practice. The training center occupied an entire section of the space station that had once been considered impregnable. Now it buzzed with activity as alien cadets learned techniques that their species had never imagined. The results were remarkable. The crystalline beings discovered that their natural ability to process multiple data streams simultaneously made them excellent at three-dimensional tactical coordination. The gas cloud entities found that their shape-shifting abilities allowed them to move through environments in ways that even humans couldn't match. The reptilian species learned that their natural patience made them perfect for long-range surveillance operations. The humans taught us something important, Seung-min had written in his report to the Galactic Military Academy. Technology should serve tactics, not the other way around. We became so dependent on our advanced systems that we forgot how to think creatively about problems. But the most dramatic changes were happening in the field. On the mining world of Kepler-7, a joint human-alien security team faced their first real test. Pirates had taken over the mining facility using advanced cloaking technology that made them invisible to conventional sensors. For 3 days, the galaxy's most sophisticated surveillance equipment had failed to locate the attackers. Then Corporal Lee Min-soo arrived with a squad of mixed-species soldiers he had trained in human techniques. "Forget the sensors," he told his team, which included 2 crystalline beings, a gas cloud entity, and a reptilian warrior. "Start thinking like hunters." Within 6 hours, they had tracked the pirates to their hidden base using methods that predated electronic surveillance by millions of years, footprints in dust, disturbances in vegetation, changes in airflow patterns. The crystalline beings proved especially good at this, their multiple data processing abilities allowing them to track dozens of small clues simultaneously. When they found the pirates, the aliens in Min-soo's squad used human-style tactics that the criminals had never encountered. Instead of announcing their presence and demanding surrender, they simply appeared inside the pirates' base through routes that the cloaking technology couldn't protect. The criminals surrendered without firing a shot. They had been prepared for advanced alien technology, not for beings who could sneak through air vents and crawl across ceilings like their ancestors had done in caves and forests. Similar stories were spreading throughout the galaxy. On trade route Gamma-7, bandits using gravity manipulation technology to trap merchant ships found themselves outmaneuvered by a security patrol that used basic physics and creative thinking to turn the gravity traps against their creators. On the diplomatic world of New Geneva, an assassination attempt against the Earth ambassador was stopped by an alien bodyguard who had learned human-style close protection techniques. Instead of relying on energy shields and automated defenses, the bodyguard had simply watched for behavioral patterns that indicated hostile intent. "The humans are changing everything," reported news correspondent Vex9 during a broadcast that reached 37 worlds. "Their methods are spreading throughout the galaxy, and the results are remarkable. Crime rates are down, military effectiveness is up, and species that have been enemies for centuries are learning to work together." But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the minds of the galaxy's leaders. "We were wrong," Jang Hye-won admitted during a council session. "We assumed that technological advancement was the only path to military superiority. The humans showed us that intelligence, creativity, and determination are more important than any weapon." The council chamber itself had been redesigned. Where once aliens had sat in isolated groups arranged by species, now mixed teams worked together on problems that required multiple perspectives. Human advisors sat next to crystalline strategists. Gas cloud communications specialists collaborated with reptilian logistics experts. "Today's agenda," announced Council Secretary Nam Bo-ra, "includes the proposal for joint training exercises between the Terran 82nd Airborne Division and the Vex-Tari Honor Guard." The Vex-Tari had been among the loudest critics of human military methods. Now they were requesting to learn paratrooper techniques for their own special forces. The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. "The Zeftai Crystal Collective has also requested human advisors for their new rapid response teams," Bo-ra continued, "and the Nebulan Gas Confederacy wants to establish an exchange program with Earth's mountain warfare specialists." Ambassador Iya Deho smiled as he listened to the reports. The demonstration 6 months ago had been meant to prove that humans deserved respect. He hadn't expected it to transform galactic civilization. "Any other business?" asked Jang Hye-won. "Yes," said Yu Jin, who had become one of the strongest supporters of human military integration. "I have a proposal for a new joint training facility." He activated a holographic display that showed plans for a massive complex built into an asteroid. The facility would simulate every known combat environment in the galaxy, plus several that we're designing specifically to challenge conventional thinking. Who would run this facility? Asked a council member, jointly. Human instructors working with the best tactical minds from every member species. The goal would be to develop new approaches to warfare that combine the best of all our capabilities. And the name of this facility? Eugen's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with his armored face. I propose we call it the Paratrooper Academy. The chamber erupted in laughter, but it was very different from the mocking laughter that had filled the same space 6 months earlier. This was the laughter of beings who had learned to appreciate a good joke, especially when the joke had taught them something important about themselves. Later that day in the training center, the latest class of mixed-species paratroopers prepared for their final exercise. They stood in the same bay where human transport ships had once been dismissed as primitive toys. Now the bay housed advanced training craft designed by human and alien engineers working together. Remember, called instructor Kim So-young to her mixed class of students, technology is a tool. It can help you, but it can't think for you. When you leave this ship, you'll be relying on your intelligence, your training, and your ability to adapt to unexpected situations. The students, crystalline beings, gas clouds, reptiles, and even a few humans, nodded their understanding. They had spent months learning that the most advanced computer in the galaxy was still the organic brain that could recognize patterns, make intuitive leaps, and find creative solutions to impossible problems. Any questions? So-young asked, a young crystalline being raised one of his appendages. Instructor, what if we encounter a situation that isn't covered in our training? Then you do what humans have been doing for thousands of years, So-young replied. You improvise, you adapt, you overcome. And if you can't do any of those things, you find someone who can, and you work together. And if there isn't anyone to work with, then you remember that every impossible situation is just a problem you haven't solved yet. The universe is big, and strange, and dangerous, but it's not smarter than you are. It just thinks it is. The transport ship reached drop altitude. The bay doors opened to reveal the vast training facility below, with its simulated environments and carefully designed challenges. It looked impossible to penetrate, just like the space station had looked 6 months ago. Go show them what you've learned, So-young said. One by one, the mixed-species paratroopers jumped into the void. They fell through space not as separate beings from different worlds, but as a team that had learned to combine their unique abilities into something greater than the sum of its parts. Below them, instructors from a dozen species watched and evaluated their performance. The exercise would test everything they had learned about human-style tactics, but more importantly, it would test their ability to think creatively when their technology failed them. Think they'll make it? Asked an alien instructor. Oh yes, replied former Sergeant Minho, who now served as the Academy's